ultimate guide. I've had with me in the studio Joseph Inti, the host of Sincerely Accra podcast, and Adrian Daniels, the host and producer of Sound of Accra. And just before we went on the break, we were going to tackle how one can grow his or her podcast. I'll start with you, Joseph.
Definitely focus on community. How we did it was to be very intentional about social media. Okay, so we started with a Twitter account. We didn't have Instagram, just Twitter. Mainly because that's where conversations happen.
Yeah.
And most of when we're doing our Vox Pops, where we're going to the streets and asking some of these questions, they would generate conversation on Twitter. So the salary for fresh graduates like this will cause a lot of conversation on Twitter, and you just engage every single. So when you put an episode out, even if it's 5 people that comments, we engage every single one of them, because when people feel seen, they're happy and they'll come back. So now that we have more platforms like Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, no matter the comments, we make sure that we reply to each one of them. And that's how you grow community. And another thing that we started to do was also give shout outs. So maybe in a week, if like 5 people followed our accounts, we'll pick 3 of them and say, hey, shout out to you, Brichu, you followed us this week. Thank you. And it spares people, because I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I know what it feels like if I send something in and they actually read it. I feel good about it.
Yeah.
So you should let your listeners feel good. And that's how you grow it. And also, like I said, when we do live events and things like that, people come, they're able to meet, engage, they feel good about it, and they feel like a part of something that they don't want to leave behind. And so then you're growing your community every time. Yeah.
That's one way we can grow our community. I'm going to come to you, Adrian. You mentioned in your submission earlier that you can make money.
Mm-hmm.
So how can someone monetize their podcast?
Yeah, there's many ways. So the traditional is through advertising. So what will happen is the traditional way is, for example, let's say you get 1,000 audio downloads on your podcast. Typically that will work out to maybe $20, $30. So right straight away, you're thinking, do I have to work that hard and just get $20, $30, from all my hard work? Because when you first start, you may not get that amount of listenership to maybe end of year 1 or year 2, depending on how popular the podcast is. So what you want to do is you want to look at things like live shows and build a community, like what Joseph and Sincerely Accra do a fantastic job. They do that amazingly. Live shows, they're in charge for tickets. People come out.
You buy MTN everywhere you go. This evening, we've been having a conversation on how to start a podcast in Ghana, your ultimate guide. And I've had with me in the studio, Joseph Inti. He is the host of Sincerely Accra podcasts. And I also have with me Adrian Daniels. And so far we've been sharing about how you can start a podcast, and also what are some of the ideas should you even decide to start today. Our phone lines are activated. You can call us on the number 0302-216-541. 0302-216-541. Let us hear from you if you have any experience to share with us. If you have any question about starting your podcast, you can just reach out and let us know. You can also send us a message on the WhatsApp number 055 1111997 055 1111 997. Have you been listening to podcasts? How beneficial have they been to you? Let us hear from you. So the last person who sent a message spoke about the fact that they can listen to a podcast literally anywhere, not like the old school radio. Why he even said that. So I just want to find out, can we just talk about this? Why should someone spend time listening to podcasts when they can just listen to a radio? Like right now, listen to radio. Why should someone spend time listening to a podcast? How different, are these two? If we can just touch on it.
Okay. Well, I think one of the things that makes podcast easy is because, like we said, it's not live. And when you find that you're idle and you don't have anything to do, you can go and listen to it. But if you are listening to a radio show, you have to know what time it is. If you have no close from work and your favorite show starts at 6, you haven't started in the car yet, you miss all of these things.
You can listen using earpiece.
Yeah, but you see, the inconvenient bit of it is that maybe you are not finished doing what you're supposed to do. So now you're listening at the same time, divided attention. But the podcast is there for you anytime. If you ever wait a weekend, then you do omnibus. Listen to everything.
Omnibus, like the soap opera.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, Adrian. What are some differences between the two? I mean, Joseph has already shared some, but between the two, I think both of them have their advantages and disadvantages, the radio and the podcast. So what are some of the things that you can share with us on that?
Yeah, I think with radio, and I mean, I used to do radio when I was at university. So with radio, normally you have, of course, people calling in. You have, a radio DJ where, people are inclined to play music. But with podcasts, it's more about, not about people calling in, or the music is more about the conversation and what's going on. So what's quite interesting now is that, you do have some podcasts where, people are kind of going back to how radio is. So you have live podcasts, a lot of live podcasts, whether it's streamed on YouTube or Facebook or whatever it is. And then you also have some people calling in, which is quite funny. So, I think podcasts, they can take the best from radio and then they add it to what the platform does. But the thing with podcasting is that, just what Joseph says, you can listen to it anytime, any place, anywhere. There's no restriction in terms of when you can consume the content. You can do it at your own disposal. And we live in such busy lives right now. We're going here, we're doing this, we're doing that, we're running for the train, running for the bus, whatever it is. So podcast obviously gives you the opportunity of freedom to consume the content, at your own leisure.
I like what you just said. And I think it's one of the reasons why we keep saying we stream live on Facebook and then on YouTube, because like Joseph, you mentioned, someone probably is in a tight corner right now, may not be able to listen to the program live,
Right.
because it's on radio. But then even for Joy FM, for instance, we have podcasts where we just post these audio files when we are done on the radio, and then on YouTube, and then on Facebook. So yeah, because of the age we are in now, we know that definitely, even though they may have advantages and disadvantages, it will just be good to make use of it. Why not? Definitely we would have to do that. So this year, we want our listeners to explore more relating topics to tech. So let's say a listener is just thinking about starting a podcast, right? What are some of the things they can consider? I know we've taken them through the application bit, but what are some of the things that they can consider? I'll start with you, with how you started yours in your wardrobe. What are some of the things I can consider?
I think the important thing about doing content, any form of content, is consistency. Especially if you want to grow your community, it's consistency. So
I like that consistency.
yes,
We don't
because
post today and then
yeah, because it's very easy to start and then somewhere along the line you stop. And I think people that consume stuff that they don't really like, that they should be able to they should be able to rely on you. You know how, like, maybe you have a favorite TV show
yeah.
that they are gone on break, they'll come back. People should be able to rely on you like that, because you become something that they enjoy. So if they're inconsistent with putting your stuff out, then it's like, okay, these people, they're not serious. So definitely when you're starting, you need to think about how often do you want to release. Sincerely Afra comes out every 2 weeks, because we know that the work it takes to bring out an episode is a lot, and we also have like 9 to 5 and stuff. So from the beginning, 2017, we knew we could not be a weekly podcast. So you have to decide, what is your frequency, okay? And then when do you plan to release it? Is it Monday? Is it Tuesday? Is it Wednesday? And why is it that you're picking those days, right? We release on Mondays because Mondays are generally stressful. Everybody hates Mondays. So we want to be that light on Monday. When you've had your long day, you listen to it and then you laugh. So you're thinking about the release day, your frequency. Also, you need to think about your promotional plan. Right now, I think things are so easy. Now, when we started, there was nothing like WhatsApp status, stories, and things like that. Now you can do that so easily and even add links in WhatsApp. Can you imagine how easy it is? Someone can discover it. So you need to think about all of this before you actually hit the ground running. And like I said, your POV. And then honestly, it's not just about hitting record. It helps, just like your show, you have segments, right? It helps to break it up. If I'm going to be listening to you for 30 minutes or 45 minutes, what is the show going to be made up of? Is it just you talking, or you want to break it up with segments? And then you also have to think of how you can grow your community. What are some of the things you can do? Is it by giving shout outs on the episode? Is it by following people back on your social media? So these are some of the things you need to think about. That's why I was saying that if you are really serious about it, then you are going to be doing a lot of thinking. But if it's just for fun, you can start a podcast.
Anything to add to that, Adrian? I think one thing I've picked is the consistency.
Yeah.
For someone who wants to start, what are some of the things they can consider in addition to this?
Absolutely. Consistency is definitely key. I think the status, most people that I think 90% of people that start podcasts can't get past episode, I think it's 7.
Whoa.
90% of people can't get past episode 7. So if you can get past episode 7, you're done. Well, why are you there about? So try to see if you can get past that. So consistency is definitely key. I also question, why is it that you want to start a podcast? Is it just for fun, for hobby? Great, cool. Then you don't really need to worry too much, because there's so many moving parts, as Joseph has said. If you want to maybe create money out of it, you want to launch a community, maybe you want to transform the mindset of people in Ghana, whatever it is, what is the reason why? Because that's going to determine how long you're going to be going for. Sound of Accra, I launched this because I wanted to promote global guiding excellence to the world. I noticed that there was no dedicated platform that showcases Ghanaian entrepreneurs, founders, creators worldwide, got in Ghana here and across the world. And I realized this is what I wanted to do. This was my main focus. But then on the back of that, you get other benefits, like you get, invited to events, you get money, you get partners, you get, whatever, right? So why is it you want to do the podcast? That will determine how long you can stay in it. And then also, you also need to think about what type of format is the podcast going to be. So is it going to be a group podcast? Are you like multiple people in the podcast? So if that's a group podcast, you need to think about, okay, how often can we meet and record? Because that would then restrict how often you can release an episode. If you're solo, if you're just one by yourself, then you can do it as quickly and as possible. And this day and age, a lot more podcasts are putting out episodes more frequently, because what's the benefit is more discoverability. They can make more money, because of the ads from the AdSense and all this kind of stuff. And then also, you also want to think about things like, what is your concept? What type of podcast is it going to be? Is it fitness? Is it running? What kind of podcast is it? You can be as niche as, I want to make a podcast just about Kenken and just talk about just Kenken.
Yeah.
So what is it that you're going to talk about? How frequently is it going to be? What type of format? I mean, there's so many different things we can go into.
The different things that we can consider. Consistency is key. You'd have to check and choose a day of the week. And I think one thing that I'm speaking from what you're saying is why you are even starting the podcast in the first place. And with that, there are times I have conversation with some youth and they tell me, oh, I want to do something related to tech. I want to do something related to IT. And I ask them, why? What is your why? Because there are a lot of jobs there now, or I want to make money. It's the same thing that we're talking about now. So podcast, right? Because it's a thing now, I want to start it. And from what you said, the statistics there, if you can't make it past the 7th episode, then that's it for you. At least if you've gone past that, then why idea part? That's what Adrian is telling you. This has been Geek Squad. We have been having a conversation on starting a podcast in Ghana. And so far, I've had with me in the studio, Joseph Inti, the host of Sincerely Accra podcast, and Adrian Daniels, the host and producer of Sound of Accra podcast. I have a message from one of our listeners, and he's saying that we should encourage you to use AI, explore using AI when you want to start a podcast. AI has really come for us now. And so today you're really doing the show with us. Thank you so much for sending through your message. Okay, so I think we have another question. This a quick message for Geek Squad. Great insights, guys, from AM. Okay, encouraged to start my podcast and get episode 7. Definitely you have to do that. Abs, definitely you have to do that. It's one of the things that personally I've thought about between YouTube and podcast. Which one should I do? But I mean, with how the conversation is going, it looks like podcast is winning. Who knows? Maybe we'll have another show talk about starting YouTube. Maybe my guests can also convince me, but it all starts with the why, and then the different things that we've spoken about that needs to be considered. We will be coming your way shortly with the quick tech fixes. We've been talking about starting a podcast in Ghana, your ultimate guide. And I've had with me in the studio, Joseph Inti, the host of Sincerely Accra, and Adrian Daniels, the host and producer of Sound of Accra. Some of the things that they have shared with us that we would need to consider when creating a podcast or starting a podcast is to check the frequency. How often do you want to release? You have to choose a day of the week, and you have to check why you're choosing that day of the week. You also have to check how you're going to be promoting your podcast. You may have to break them into segments. Consistency is very important. You don't just post one today and then post one. You start first 5 weeks you are posting and then you go on break for like a month. No, your listeners will not be happy with you when you do that. And then the type of format is also necessary. You need to just check and know if you're going to be doing it in a group, you are just doing it as a solo. You have to check that all that plays a role in doing the podcast, in starting the podcast. So can we just talk a bit about hosting a podcast in Ghana? Is there anything peculiar that you may have faced in your journey? I'll start with you, Joseph, before I get to.
Well, definitely. Like I said, when we started, a lot of people didn't know what podcasts were. So just getting people to listen. And the way, what is a podcast? Then I'm like, oh, I have a podcast. What is a podcast? And we tell them, okay, so is it like just that whole getting people to understand what it was. And then of course, in doing this, you are putting a lot of time and resource. So you also want to kind of get something out of it.
Yeah.
And like Adrian said, you make money through ads because it's like you are building a listenership. And so if brands want to connect with people who are listening to your podcast, they can do just like you guys do here. You could do an LPM or you can have us put adverts on there. And in the beginning, it was very hard convincing brands to do that because like, what's a podcast?
Exactly.
Who are you? We don't know. You know what I mean? They are used to traditional media. So it's been an uphill battle getting brands to like easily like work with podcasts and also do that. But it's changing slightly. It's not where it's supposed to be. So I would say definitely the challenge has been, mobilizing funds to do certain things because we've been in the game for 7 years this year, and every year we try to do something different and exciting. We started doing a live show last year. So we do a live show once a month. And to do that is money, and yeah, you can always be taking for your own personal, so just getting brands to work with and people to fully understand what the opportunities with podcasts was very difficult, but it's getting there slowly.
We can see that. Anything from you, Adrian? Were there peculiar issues you've had starting a podcast in Ghana?
Oh, Dumso. Yeah. Straight to it. I was recording in January 2022. And 2023, sorry, and yeah, experienced a lot of Dumso when recorded with some guests because what's popular now is the in-person podcast. So you can do remote, you can do online and all this stuff, audio, but the in-person podcasts are so important. So when you have an in-person podcast, you have to think about lighting, cameras, action, all this stuff. But yeah, Dumso has been a problem, that's for sure. But also you have to consider also like you're putting money into this, right? So here in Ghana, hire cameramen, camera equipment typically to come and you hire a cameraman and they've said, they're going to drop the camera at 9 a.m. It doesn't come till 2 p.m. So you have guests who are waiting to come in the show and then you have to go and get your
like Ghana Van time. I don't know where we picked this.
I mean,
right.
No, but to be fair, I just want to say, the transportation system in Ghana allows for anything to happen. Like you can.
But you set off early, Joseph.
No, but you can set off early and then the road is blocked and I have to go use another road. You can set off early and the transport tire will burst. Yeah, I just feel like sometimes you need to consider we don't live where we have like fast trains where that if you get on at this time, you get on at this time.
Are you supporting the Ghana Van time?
I'm just saying there are nuances to it. Sometimes, honestly, I've set off early from home before, and in the road I was going to use, they blocked it for a funeral.
For a funeral or a party. Surely that's happen. Interesting. Okay, we'll be talking about how one can grow his or her podcast. We'll be talking about that right after taking what's happening for the quick tech fixes.